Is Starfield, the huge RPG coming from Bethesda, in trouble? That is the question being asked all over the internet in the wake of Redfall's, let's just kind of call it, less than stellar reviews. There have been articles popping up with titles like, "After Redfall, should we be worried about Starfield?" And then there's this gem, "After Redfall, worried for Starfield? Perhaps you should be." Hang on, I think that's not done in the right voice. "After Redfall, worried for Starfield? Perhaps you should be." Honestly, I'm a little more worried about my Yoda impression and the title of this article than I am about Starfield. And I kind of want to get into why. To catch people up, Starfield is perhaps the highest profile game launching this year. It's the first game from Bethesda Game Studios since the poorly received Fallout 76 launch and the mobile game Elder Scrolls Blades in 2018 and 2019. It's important to note here that Bethesda Game Studios and Bethesda Softworks are different, both beneath Zenimax Media, which is also over Arcane Studios, the developer that made Redfall. And to tie that all up in a convoluted sludge of brand on brand, they're all under Xbox Game Studios, after ZeniMax completed becoming part of Microsoft Xbox Game Studios group on March 9th of 2021. That's part of the reason why Redfall's failure is being brought up when mentioning Starfield by so many different outlets. The obvious studio connections despite the different developer teams. The other part of this is the fact that it is a down year for Xbox and Xbox Game Pass, with few exclusives and Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox, recently coming out and stating that they are firmly in third place behind Sony and Nintendo in the quote-unquote console wars. That adds to the anxiety around the release that has honestly been decades in the making. But that's also kind of the point. If you weren't worried about Starfield, where have you been? What makes Redfall's failure worse than all of the weight that has been on Starfield? This game has so much that needs to go right for it that it would be a little bit strange not to have some worry about it. It's one of the most hyped up games we've seen in a very long time, perhaps since Cyberpunk 2077. The game is the first new IP for Bethesda in 25 years, and it's incredibly ambitious at that. It has been described as the Skyrim in space. How could it not be ambitious? We first saw a teaser trailer for Starfield all the way back in 2018. It has seen delays, which honestly I've come to appreciate in the gaming industry because it means they're taking a PR hit to ensure quality, finally announcing their release on September 6th of 2023. Now, that thought process is kind of derailed by the fact that Redfall was actually delayed as well, and didn't exactly launch to stunning success. But to that I just have to kind of wonder, how much worse could it have been? But as always, some gas has been thrown on the fire with some rumors from some leaks, but since all of that are completely unconfirmed, I'm not really going to cover much of that here. But if you're interested in that, I have linked the article from GameRanks below, which does go into the leaks. Take note that the leaker also stated Diablo 4 was in a rough state, and having played the beta, well, yeah, there were some issues in towns with rubber banding, but it was also wildly successful in my opinion. I had a lot of fun playing it and found it to be in a really great state. Perhaps not a full launch state just yet. There were some balancing changes that needed to happen, but they did those. And we'll get to see exactly how much they've done in the upcoming test later this month. So, should you be worried about Starfield? Well, probably. It's a good idea, I think, to be skeptical of game launches in general with a history of broken and unfinished games launching over the last few decades. And hell, Bethesda is kind of known in part for the bugs that happen at launch. But bugs to me are one of the smallest problems with game launches, as long as they aren't completely game breaking. The amount of bugs that can be found by the millions of player hours going into game launch versus the thousands of testing hours from part or full-time employees for any given game are exponentially different. My concerns about Starfield have always been more about it being another No Man's Sky, which, to its credit, has had a long road to relevance and they've put in countless post-launch hours to improve the game, but that's the part that I struggle with, the fact that they had to, because it was not complete when it launched. And Starfield is making huge promises, and the number of planets alone has me questioning, can it possibly be complete? Because I really am, and to go back to it, that's kind of what what No Man's Sky was promising. Promises made and not being kept about content, or in the case of Redfall, frames per second, are my worries on Starfield. And it's all about how many of those tons and tons of worlds are actually going to be worth going to. In-game content has been and will be my worry for Starfield until I see it launch. But Redfall's issues don't impact those worries at all, one way or the other. Is there more pressure on Starfield now? Yes, of course, but there's more pressure across the board anytime a game stumbles or fails. This may have made it more likely that people will cancel their Game Pass until September, but I don't see the correlation some people are making between the games, largely because Arcane and Bethesda Game Studios are two different developers, but more so because there's never been so much riding on Redfall as Starfield. Starfield almost has to be a success. It's the Cyberpunk 2077 for Bethesda Game Studios. Let's just hope it launches in a better state. But let's say that Starfield does fail, that it is not as good as we expect it to be, that we lack content and we don't have enough to play, or it has game-breaking bugs that just make it in a really an unplayable state. Or perhaps the more likely thing, that some of the console ports or the PC port have issues that the others don't, because that's like we've been seeing a lot of, is issues with one port of the game. Well, there are still other things that you can play in 2023. Other fantastic RPGs, one that is actually launching just a couple days before Starfield's purported launch. And that's like games like Baldur's Gate 3. And I covered some of those games and what we can expect in 2023 in this video right here. So if you want to kind of insulate yourself, protect yourself from the oncoming potential disappointment of Starfield, I recommend checking out that video so you can expand a list of other potential disappointments. Being a fan of games is an interesting thing, isn't it?